And we're pleased just to make sure that you all know you're here for the right conversation with Dakota Gruener, who's the Executive Director of ID2020. She's been doing that for 4 years. ID2020 is a public-private partnership that is using accelerating technology to ensure that every person on the planet has a unique digital identity as part of a basic human right. And I think it's very interesting. I'd like to hear how that came about, because I think that's it's sort of cutting edge in my view in terms of looking at that as a human right and what that actually means. So maybe what we can do is just start off for you in terms of, again, a little bit more about ID 2020 and what is it that you do and the organization does?
Sure. So like you said, ID 2020 is a public-private partnership. We have partner organizations who range from Microsoft, Accenture, some very large private sector companies, as well as large public sector institutions like Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Mercy Corps, Kiva, Care, large NGOs who are helping to meet the needs of some people in areas very remote. This sort of unlikely group of partners have all come together with a commitment to good digital identity. And when I say good digital identity, I mean digital identity that is portable, that's privacy protecting, and that where individuals can own and manage their own data. And in that, there are really two distinct challenges that we're focused on. The first is that there are over 1 billion people worldwide who have no form of identification whatsoever. They have no birth certificate, no passport, no driver's license, you name it. And that makes it incredibly difficult for them to claim their rights, their benefits, really to have a life of economic opportunity. The second challenge, and I think this is one that all of us can relate to, because I truly think this is a challenge for all 7 billion people on the planet, is that at the moment, none of us have a particularly reliable, trusted, easy mechanism to prove our identity online. You think about the thousands of usernames and passwords that most of us have, the frequency with which we forget those passwords and have to go through the motions to set up a new one. And what each one of those are, to some extent, is a digital ID, right? It's a way of proving who you are online to a single institution. And the problem is that your data ends up siloed. So you have information fractured across all of these thousands of different institutions, and that data is the institutions, it's not yours. And so you don't have the ability to, in a sort of simple and easy manner, maybe prove that you have received a college degree, use that to apply for employment, use your employment verification to apply for a loan, whatever it is, it's really, really difficult to do. Mm-hmm. And so, really what we're imagining and what, this collection of partners is setting out to create is a world where all 7 billion people can prove who they are and can gain access to the rights and the services that they deserve, both offline and online.
So let's go to this is sort of is a setting for you, but a setting for what you do. Let's talk really about sort of your career track. Okay, we were just talking about this a little bit earlier. You were a biology and political science major, and now you're the executive director of a digital ID sort of public-private partnership organization. So, I think people would be really interested to hear how you got to where you are right now from that point when you were in university, and just take us through that.
Sure. There's a bit more of a through line to it than that, than one might think.
But that's that's a big gap, and there's got to be some continuity.
It's a big gap. Yeah. So like you said, I studied biology and political science. And that was really my own way of creating a global health major. So I studied at Brown. It's actually a school that allows you tons of flexibility in terms of what you study, what you major in, what you do within your major. Philip, I know you know this well.
Yep.
And but what I found, there was a sort of public health major that yeah, I say this with all love and respect to the Brown Public Health Program, but I didn't find satisfying. There was sort of a number of courses you'd take on epidemiology and statistics and whatnot. But it felt like it sat in this sort of middle ground where you were studying some of these kind of modeling type tools, and you were thinking a lot about social determinants of health and whatnot. But you didn't have the sort of micro on the biology level to be able to understand, some of the pathogens and whatnot that we were then, trying to understand how they move through the world. And simultaneously, there wasn't kind of the public policy lens of, okay, these things are happening, what do we do about them? And so, my real focus was saying, okay, can I actually just split this into two and study the biology and study the public policy piece? And, so sort of did both of them in parallel. And what I found over the course of my time at Brown was that the thing that was really interesting to me was really sort of the intersection of public policy and market forces. I wrote my senior thesis on the development of antiretrovirals for HIV and sort of the impacts of intellectual property law on that. Sort of saying it's not just a public health situation that we're trying to manage with HIV. It's a business situation, and it's around law. And how is it that we can create tools and systems that achieve the greatest possible social impact in a way that makes sense for all of the various stakeholders who are involved. Otherwise, they won't play the game. And so I think that's actually in some ways been one of the through lines to my work, is really that intersection. So after university, I went to work at Oliver Wyman. It's a management consulting firm.
So what did you learn there?
Didn't have any. I know. Well, I got really lucky. I had taken a number of courses on vaccine development in my time at Brown, and was sort of really interested in, sort of that piece of the global health world. And I think truly my second day at Oliver Wyman, when I don't think I knew what management consulting was, nonetheless, much else, a partner needed some help with a paper that he was putting together on vaccine development. And I, sort of raised my hand and said, I'm happy to help out, don't know much, but, if I can support this. And, frankly, what happened was the analyst who'd been doing the work, up until I was brought onto this project, didn't have a biology background and was trying to parse information that really required some knowledge of, the various different mechanisms of vaccine development and subtypes of, kind of vaccine types. And I looked at the data that had been analyzed to sort of support this white paper that the partner wanted to publish, and realized that all of the conclusions were wrong. The data had been misunderstood, and that the paper was founded on pretty faulty understandings of this, sort of vaccine development landscape. And so I went to this partner and said, I'm sorry, but don't publish this white paper. Bad things are going to happen. It's just not accurate. And, I think he was sort of taken aback and then said, basically, kid, come with me. And I worked with him for most of the remainder of my time at Oliver Wyman. And he led most of our vaccine related work, that spanned both work for the pharmaceutical companies, but also a lot of the work for the Gates Foundation. And so, while I had been worried, I think, in taking a job in management consulting, that I wasn't going to get to do the sort of global health work that I loved, somehow I found myself sort of, working for the Gates Foundation squarely on the things that were really important to me. From there, one of the organizations that the Gates Foundation has invested in, perhaps more than any other, I'm not sure on the numbers, but to the tunes of multiple billions of dollars, is an organization called Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. And Gavi is a public-private partnership focused on immunization. And so most of, a lot of my work, either directly or indirectly, while I was at Oliver Wyman, was was tied to work that Gavi was doing. Gavi procures vaccines for about 60% of the world's children. So the scale of their impact is just staggering. And I guess it was early in 2013, I think it was 2013, happened to be at a conference where Gavi's CEO was, attending. And he hosted I don't quite know what to call it, it was like a challenge where they were sort of saying, we want, this is a business problem that Gavi is dealing with. We want participants at this conference, to basically offer, unexpected insights about how we could go about, solving this challenge. And over the course of the week, there was a, sort of structured amount of time for us to work together on this challenge. And I, leapt at the opportunity, got to know Seth, the CEO of Gavi, sort of scribed for this little group, and ended up moving from Oliver Wyman to Gavi, and working directly for Seth in 2014.
Okay, at a relatively early time in your career, suddenly you're an executive director of an organization. Was that intimidating for you? How did this all come about? Or is it really something that because you were able to just create something? That's what it is, right? And you decided to run it.
Yeah. I think that I probably in hindsight should have been more overwhelmed and by what I was taking on. I think that I had such conviction in the sort of importance of this work, and I had such conviction in the necessity of a public-private partnership model. I think I had the rare fortune of having spent time at Gavi seeing how, a really effective public-private partnership works. And so it wasn't just that I sort of cared about the substance, but I also had sort of seen a little bit on sort of the operational level of how this could be done. And, perhaps some hubris, but a sense of like, this is really important. I see a path from where we are to where we could go. And, there's just a sense of like, gotta run with it. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm still learning absolutely every day. But the number of, the number of things that come with being, the founder of any startup, and in this case, I should note, I wasn't the founder of the organization. Someone, had created the organization basically to say digital ID really matters, and had hosted an event. And I showed up at this event, saw a very different room of people than I'd ever seen, kind of sitting together in the spirit of collaboration on this really important topic, and went to him and said, that's fantastic. What comes next? You've been given kind of room to run. Where are you going to run? And he said, I don't know. I was hosting an event. I wanted to raise awareness around this being important and help to connect some dots between people who might not otherwise have kind of come into contact with one another. And I basically said, okay, I think I've got a vision. Can I help out? And the two of us kind of took it from there.
So when you're looking at this, okay, again, I'm just thinking about, people are listening now, and people will be seeing this in a different context as well on YouTube and whatever. So I'm curious that, what are as you look back, what are the things that you had? You had a vision, you had passion about what you wanted to do. What were the things what else made you kind of feel like that this worked for you? Were there, because I'm thinking people are saying, well, if I wanted to do what you did, what are the things that I got to be looking for, right?
Yeah. So, the first thing is, I think, developing some real hard skills early in your career is really important. And I think there are different permutations of what that can take. But, in my case, consulting taught me how to model, it taught me how to build, a compelling PowerPoint presentation. It taught me how to take a problem apart and, kind of dissect it and, come up with, I think, a pretty methodical approach to how I'd go about answering the big questions. And and I think similarly, if you're interested in a career that involves a lot of writing, like making sure that you're really honing your craft. I find that what's, certainly when I'm reviewing resumes or when I'm talking to friends about the sort of progression of their career, it's amazing how much investing in sort of a set of skills early on is really important, because I think it gives you the basis from which you have tons of room and latitude to say, here's the substantive area I want to apply these skills to, and you've got kind of the basis from which to make a really good case for, why you're really good at doing it. So I think that was really important. But then I think the other thing that served me was pretty quickly focusing. I think that it's easy to be a generalist for a long time. There's so many roles where, you work on strategy and you kind of do a broad base of activities, or maybe you occupy a similar role, but in a huge number of different substantive areas. And I think it's, having depth of knowledge in one area is just so valuable in the sense of proving your expertise and kind of, allowing you to seem maybe more, further along than your years.
So a couple of questions, both privately to me and to, people, again, I think it's one of the things that struck me about you is, it's pretty cool how you were able to sort of parlay all this into something that has such broad reach. And so, one person here has asked, do you have any advice for someone in their last year of university? How can I best prepare myself, that person, for a career? And maybe you can sort of mix along there sort of the career advice that you got from people or lessons learned, in a sense, that you found really helpful as you were navigating all of this.
Yeah. So I think this is advice both in the last year of university and kind of early in a career that I was given and I found particularly helpful, which is finding both mentors and champions. And I think they're different. Oftentimes we think of, we're given a lot of advice to find a mentor and to find somebody who you can go to and ask questions to, and and really get some sort of guidance as you navigate some of these choices. What I found is that you want both the people who you're going to and have the space to say, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm navigating between these two potential choices and I don't know which of the two I should do. And there's that safe space of having that type of conversation. And you also want a few people who it's sometimes they're the same person, but I think it's good sometimes to have different people. Somebody who's just going to, like, at every point be a rally, they're going to rally you. You're going to ask for a recommendation. They're going to say the best possible things about you. And I think, sometimes the reason I distinguish between the two is that sometimes a champion is somebody who, they're really useful because they're very well networked. They know people that you might want to work for. Whereas a mentor can be, somebody who's, maybe more of a peer. I don't think your mentors always need to be the most aspirational people. You want someone you have a really trusted relationship with, and who can take the time to to sort of be there and to help you. That's one piece. I think specifically in the last year of university, two thoughts. The first is, if you have a sense of what you want to do after college, I would just be incredibly it's not just diligent, right? But I'd be quite bold about seeking out opportunities relating to what you want to do. Something
an advanced degree?
What was that?
Do you think people need an advanced degree to seek things what they want boldly?
Oh. No, I don't have an advanced degree. Many of my friends doing, I think, sort of the most interesting things don't have advanced degrees. Clearly, in some sectors, that's necessary, right? You can't be a doctor without getting your MD. But I think that, and I think sometimes for some people, an advanced degree is an incredibly useful thing, right? It allows you time to reflect. It gives you those hard skills that are really important. But I think it varies a lot sector to sector, kind of the necessity or value of one of these advanced degrees. But in terms of being bold, something I've been surprised by and continue to be surprised by is basically the extent to which you can cold email somebody you would really admire and get a response. And it takes a while to figure out how to get their email address, and it takes a while to formulate a really good email that will capture their attention. But I actually, with Seth, the CEO of Gavi, who I ended up working for, I think when he was hosting that challenge, I was terrified, but really, really wanted to be in it. And I forget whether I'd been qualified to be in it, simply by virtue of being in the conference. But I remember, I think I signed up for Twitter so that I could direct message him on Twitter, telling him I, was a 22-year-old who really wanted to be in his challenge, or whatever, 22, 23. And, had I not done that, who knows? And so I think that there's just a lot to be said for, there's some of these moments that they feel really uncomfortable, but stretching in moments like that and reaching out to people who might seem a little bit out of reach can pay off with dividends. And if it doesn't, they didn't open your email.
So how about, okay, here's a couple, two questions. One, we had talked about. So what do you like most and what do you like least about your job?
Oh boy. Okay. Let's see. What I love most, and this is very personal, and people are wired very differently. But I love the entrepreneurial aspect of it. I love that I'm building something and have built it from the ground up. I love that it's scrappy, and we are, we're in this constant position of saying, what is the most strategic way that we can go about doing things that we believe are high impact. And that there's so much room to think and to play, and to create your own work. And so that I love. What I like least about my job, up until COVID, I probably would have said I'm on a plane, at least once a week. And at some point you really want to be at home with your dog in your bed. So that was, that's no longer the case. So I guess work has gotten a lot better in some regards in the context of COVID, which is a strange, strange and sort of bizarre thing to say.
You kind of alluded to this in college, the high school and college classes. I mean, you talked about writing. They want to know what most prepared you, I guess, during those periods of time.
In terms of writing and classes, I mean, I was incredibly fortunate to have a notoriously mean English teacher in 11th grade, or notoriously nitpicky. He's actually very lovely, but he was, he was quite the stickler. And it's interesting in looking at the friends of mine from high school. In retrospect, most of these friends are incredible writers now. It clearly really paid off to have this really tough English professor. And I think writing is one of those things, it's really hard to get good at unless you have someone like that. You need to find a situation where you've got somebody who's just relentlessly focused on good writing. And kind of over the course of a year or 6 months, a semester, just put things in front of them and let them tell you why it's not as eloquently worded as it should be. And you just practice and practice and practice. And so, it's uncomfortable. I think we all take writing quite personally. And when somebody doesn't like your writing, it feels like quite an affront. Or that's maybe just me, but but I think it's important. I think that it's one of those places where pushing yourself out of your comfort zone probably matters, even more than other skill sets.
Okay. So why don't we, let's kind of end with this. I've got, we've kind of gone longer than I thought we would or should, but So let's start with, so people know, talk about what you see, or if you think about when I say your failures, so people know that you can get up and move on. And then I want you to talk about kind of what inspires you to go to the office every day. I mean, you talk about things that you really like to do, that you like about your job, but clearly there's some sort of thing that holds all of you and your organization together in terms of a larger sort of goal, and talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I guess in terms of failures, I've had countless. I think we all have, and they range from very small to very large. I think one thing that to me felt like quite a failure was actually leaving Geneva. I was working for Gavi in Geneva. I was working for Seth, and it had felt like the sort of dream job. And clearly I'd gotten there and had this sort of realization about birth registration and digital ID, and had come up with this sort of personal interest in the topic, but didn't see that changing the course of my work. I thought I was at Gavi for a long while, and while I was there, personal life interrupted that, as sort of is so often the case, and decided for personal reasons that I was 9 time zones away from my family. I was 6 time zones away from my partner. And that didn't seem tenable anymore. And it felt to me like a tremendous failure. I felt like, in that moment, I was like, I have my dream job and I'm giving it up. It was really tough. I moved back to the States. I was still working for Gavi. They were, lovely and said, we want to keep you kind of in the mix. But the role that I'd had, only worked if I was sitting in Geneva side by side with Seth. And so that was, I think was really difficult. And a moment when it would have been really easy to sort of say, like, how have I failed? And, where am I going to go from here? And, I took an opportunity and squandered it. And I think what so often happens is that, like, failure begets new opportunities. And I think had I not done that, I wouldn't have gone to the ID2020 summit. I wouldn't have pursued this, this sort of interest of mine as much as I ended up doing it on the side. And, none of this would have happened. So that's certainly at least one moment when there was a sort of real sense of failure or loss. And then, in terms of motivation and like what gets me up in the morning and what I think motivates me and the team, I really do go back to that, kind of that vision that I outlined at the beginning. It's the work that we're doing feels so foundational to me. And the idea that, even if in a minor way, we could help facilitate, all 7 billion people being able to prove who they are and being able to access, these rights and these services. It just feels like there's nothing, frankly, there's like nothing better I could be doing with my time. And, I think as my family or, my partner would tell you, I think often the challenge is sort of ripping me away from my laptop rather than, the inverse, because there's just, there's such a deep sense of possibility in what we're doing.
Great. So with the final question here, what would you say for people who will be listening to this? What is, leave us 2 thoughts about what they should be, as they're contemplating. So everyone is sort of dealing with, COVID-19, there's a lot going on. What are the things that you want people, what do you want to leave people with in terms of what they should be, what they can be doing or thinking about?
So these are off the cuff, but sort of 2 thoughts and things that I've been thinking a lot about in the context of COVID and kind of how we all, participate and sort of strengthen, come out of this collectively stronger. The first is that I think this pandemic is forcing a lot of really big conversations about structural things that might have just kind of gone along in the status quo indefinitely. And there's sort of never been a better time to for sort of serious systemic change. And so I think, for individuals who are excited about how you make the world a better place, this is the moment. It's a horrible moment. It's a scary moment. But this is quite a moment to be able to, sort of be of service. So I guess the first thing is just like, recognizing that we're in this moment, and there's so many ways that we can help both in the immediate and in the kind of longer term rebuilding of the, society that we want to live in. On a more practical level, I think that the what this pandemic has shown us is really the importance of strong public institutions, of health authorities, of the World Health Organization, of so many of these organizations that I think oftentimes it's quite easy to forget keep our our society sort of pulled together and functioning well. And so there's just so many, there's so many sort of really, really important organizations who I think suddenly are in the spotlight in ways that I think are really wonderful. And I hope that it inspires a large group of public servants, and a large group of people who say, let's turn, how do we go strengthen these institutions that matter so much?
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you. Thank you so much, Dakota Gruener, Executive Director of ID 2020. Thank you for taking the time to sort of share your experiences and share some of the things that you have gone through. I think people who will be listening to this or who have listened are going to, find a lot of what you have to say of great value. So we're going to sign off now to everyone. Thank you very much. And then Dakota, we can just sort of, just for a few moments to sort of, regroup a little bit and go from there. So everyone, thank you very much.